Thank you all for participating in this session. And actually, well, before I take questions from the audience, I would like to ask two of mine. And the first one is, I feel that for the artist here, for the curator slash collector slash archivist here, and for another collector, Leonid Talchkin here, their projects, all of these projects are basically endless. This is the endless archiving. This is the endless search for for new documents to add to the narrative. Is that so, or if maybe I'm mistaken in this regard?
Maybe I can respond first. As an artist, I think, as I understand your question is like a little bit similar as yesterday's, like when is the end? Is it like, I think for me it's, as you said, it's never ending. Also because the more I learn about, for example, my grandfather, the more I learn about other things, is more urgent for me to create a person which will not die. So the person without a specific name, the person is not someone. It's just maybe a mixture of everyone, so without a forever life. So maybe this could be my response.
Yeah, I prefer to speak Russian, so in fact, when I was making my presentation, I mentioned that my research is never-ending one, because it's good that Chernyshov is still alive, and it would be great to visit him, to have a talk with him, because it's, it's challenging. Some people already tried, attempted, but failed to make a conversation with him. But I am talking about just the very beginning of this work, just the inception phase where we begin to study. As a historian of art, it's great when there is an opportunity to reconstruct at least a small portion of that time or person just frozen in time and archive. Anyway, as an artist, person evolves, but we can freeze it for a moment, so it's like sand pouring through our fingers, but we're trying to catch a particular period of time and to freeze it, and but we cannot grab it and keep it for a long time, like a personality cannot be frozen, but we're trying to do our best. At least my study, my research is almost at the inception phase, and I'm just kind of going back in time. And the more you take a deep dive in it, the more you realize that you don't know anything. But once you pull this string, you are getting understanding, and it pulls the enormous layers of information and references you to different points.
Yes. Well, as far as Setzigelob is concerned, I think the endless characteristic of the work is precisely the drive of his own practice as a bibliographer, because of course when you compile a bibliography, the idea is to have something complete, but of course it's always a dream, or so that was pretty much his drive. But then life is maybe more pragmatic, and sometimes he had to stop one project to start another one, or so yeah, that's it.
But in principle, they're endless. Yes, they could be. The information could be gathering and gathering. For Bibliographica, for example, it could be added every year with thousands and millions maybe of titles, like, and get into this machine of never-ending.
Yeah, but then it depends how many records there are on the subject, how many publications are about textiles. What I noticed in general in our free presentation, it's really the kind of recursivity, of self-reflexivity of the archive methodology, which I think is also part of the endless aspect, because it's a machine that is always circular in a way, and in the end it's a bit the archivist archiving himself while archiving the subject. So.
Another question I think for all of you is that in the strategies that you employ and maybe are influenced by Natelychkin's case, and Seth employed, was there a strong hierarchy of the sources? Like, what is the main level of documents that you use? What is the middle level? What is the low level? Or is it not that important? For example, metadata, as an example. The list of exhibitions that relates to a biography of a certain artist. Is there a kind of, are there three stories to that? Are there three levels to that, or maybe more? Or is that something that kind of grows from one aspect to another, or grows into another aspect?
So far, as per my understanding, I'm convinced that, of course, we have contentious points in my perception, but that's why we're here, to discuss them. For me, the backbone, these are the metadata, and we place them in a network. Artist was involved in exhibitions, communicated with other people, so the works of art were distributed across such and such collections. These are the points. We build a mesh, a network, a grid, and we just embed stories. It's like a meat to the bone. And we reconstruct the person as it is. This is my concept. This is my approach.
So to speak, check-in is the first level. The ground level is checking in the artist, and then it grows further.
I believe you're right. I believe this is the most convenient approach for the art historian.
Who maybe?
I think for me, it's really not for me to decide to set it into these levels. It's more like the situation you described later. Like it's always like something I encountered, and then it leads me to another thing. So I also really enjoy working like this. It's because it's. Working with unknown is interesting for me. So
unknown. In what sense unknown?
Because in order to do research, not in a physical library or collection, I always choose to go to the place, to the physical place, and sometimes I will hear things from people, sometimes I will read other things, but later I discovered it has some kind of connection with the things I'm looking for. So this is something like unknown, like it's always there, but it may be connected with me and through other things. So, yeah.
Okay. Maybe you will comment on because Seth's efforts are looking, for me, I perceive them as kind of a postmodern borderlessness in a way. Or am I wrong? And there is a hierarchy of knowledge that he had when he did his projects.
Yes, but maybe I'd like first to reply to your previous question. Sigilab work is composed of several layers. So the middle layer for him was the list, so that can be developed in catalogs or in bibliographies. So based on this, what is interesting to see is what's, let's say, down. So it's the objects with which he's working with, so books or artworks. And then you have a top level on top of the list. It's, let's say, the master list. And in the case of Sigilab, he developed several, let's say, research centers, and then a foundation that gather all those research centers. Then from the point of view of the researcher, this makes a bit difficult to approach the subject because of the different layers. And what I try to do is I try to use his own tools to understand his work, but sometimes use different methodology to understand what's really happening in his work and the different things he is doing. And then your second question.
Hierarchy of levels, like, is there a more important level or a less important level, or?
Well, for him, that's what I tried to explain in my presentation, is that for him the most important is the list. And then the question is, what do you do with the object? So that's what I tried to explain based on the bibliography about textiles he compiled, because he collected the books together to compile the bibliography, but in the end, all the books were warehoused and not accessible. So that's the kind of paradox in his practice, which is related more generally to an attitude of, let's say, general theories about books and bibliotheconomy and bibliography and catalogs. So is touching a very important problem, well, the difference between the list and the objects registered in the list.
Maybe anyone could ask something. Could we have a microphone, please?
So, while listening to your presentations, I was thinking that it's really fascinating because all of you have gotten like really closely into this one person, like in his life and his work, and there is such a dedication. And then I was thinking about what happens when you discover this one personality so deeply. You must also come across certain kind of contradictions, you know, like, for example, he would be like a great researcher or collector, but also, I don't know, a misogynist or something that kind of totally breaks the image, or, yeah, from Novade's perspective. And I wonder if something like this has happened to you, or maybe not, but you can kind of comment on like what to do in this kind of situation, how to show this contradiction in your research, like when you present it as an exhibition or...
Но на самом деле вот мой герой Михаил Чернышов.
Michael Chernyshov is a very complicated person. You know, I was trying to approach his personality. I'm very keen on this artist, and I know he's terribly difficult as a person. Yeah, it was frightening for me, and it's still once I make it happen, the visit in the States, no one knows whether he allows me in or not, because the exchange of mails between Talochkin and Chernyshov, I was showing you the fragments, I was reading your quotes. This is something, really something. But it adds the volume to the personality, it makes it more complex. We are here not to be petted and encouraged, but there are disruptive moments in life, so And that's why these persons, these individuals are so attractive for us. We shall not have rose spectacles on our eyes. And so we have metadata, and everything rests upon this metadata. Anyway, it's clear in research, and especially in case of an artist, and I'm an art historian, I'm a scientist. We shall not have any personal romantic moments, like dreamy moments, or a person is an ideal one. We shall not think about artists that way. This is what I'm trying to eradicate, and I'm managing so far. Yeah, so far I'm managing quite successfully. I'm tackling
Sarah,
this task.
Do you have anything to add?
Yes. Well, regarding Sigelob, lots of my efforts concentrated on contextualizing his work because, as I briefly said, has been involved in 3 different worlds, doing many different things. So I really contextualize what he has done related to professional practices, related to books. And the important thing to keep in mind is that Sigelob was a self-taught person. So he didn't really, just going back also of the idea of creativity, which I think is really key. He has been really, he was a creative person, even though not an artist. But he didn't really invented methods. In fact, he was reusing several methods, different kind of methods, and combining them together. So respect to professional criteria, sometimes his work is not, let's say, professional, but he was more experimenting and working as his own level, building his own tools, with combining existing methods. So that's I think, the important thing to keep in mind.
Maybe this beautiful question could be adapted to your practice in regards to family history. For example, you delve deeper into that and you find something that is extremely uncomfortable for you and your families. And
I think more and more I realize, and also more and more I want to do maybe in the future, is not to kind of leave the real figure of my grandfather, because during the process, I discovered there are so many common things happening, all families, because between generations has been clear cut. So there's, for example, if he didn't tell me that those things, I would never discover it. So this kind of situation is very common in China, in all families. So I also try my best to kind of take something from him, but to give it back to everyone, not in order to really get into him as a real person. And also as maybe a response to Sigelob's exhibition, because I saw the exhibition, I think for me the most interesting part is the work Mario Garcia Torres did as a response to practice. I think that's for me, it's the real touching part for me to understanding a lot about Sigelob's practice. So to say this is because I still believe that maybe the artist or someone else besides the archivist can also provide another kind of reading of those materials. Of course, the archiving itself is very important.
we had another question from the audience. Thank you.
I'm Maxim Ilyukhin, I'm an artist, and I have the following question related to archive activities. How do you tackle the task on objectivity of perspective, objectivity of research, and your subjective stand? Anyway, your stand is always subjective. How do you reconcile this? This is what I wanted to share you about. No doubts that in the art historian approach, there shall be a minimum level of subjectivity, minimum level of personalized perspective. But once we reconstruct any phenomenon, still we look through our own eyes and we invest a part of our own personality. That's why we go to archive. That's why we refer to the purified information in a way. Why I mentioned this metadata backbone. They give us the possibility not to baseline on the stories told by the people, because not just a historian invests a part of himself, but the storytelling is very subjective. And so if you so the other people knowing certain artists, they might say this is a remarkable person, but other person can be subjective and said this is a bad guy. So I want to clear up this field and just remove all the personal impact.
So if Sara and who want to add something, but I really ask for you to be quick because we have to have a 15-minute break before the next session.
Shall I say something? Well, as personally, I approach the subject of Cyrillop's career as an anthropologist. So I started my research when he was still alive. So I had many chances to meet him, did interviews, and also to be with him like when he was working. So really like as a field trip, an anthropological field trip. And my focus was precisely on the use he had of documents, printed matter. So it can be called an anthropology of writing. And that's the way I approach the subject.
Thank you. Who?
Probably I will be on the totally contrast side, so yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.